I remember the exact moment my 7-year-old daughter raised her hand during her father's wedding. The minister had smiled at the guests and asked the familiar question no one genuinely expected to be answered. Does anyone here have a reason why these two should not be married? A few guests exchanged amused looks. Someone near the back gave a quiet laugh. Then Sophie stood up, her small ivory flower girl dress brushed against the wooden floor of the chapel. Beyond the tall windows, the gray-blue Atlantic stretched along the rocky coast of Maine. Sophie's basket slipped from her fingers, scattering white rose petals around her shoes. My former husband, Michael Bennett, leaned toward her. He wore the strained smile of a man trying to remain calm in front of more than 100 people. "Sophie," he whispered, "please sit down." She remained standing. "I have something to say." Every conversation, cough, and nervous laugh stopped. Michael's bride, Claire, turned pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I knew none of this was happening. At that moment, I was thousands of kilometers away in Amsterdam, sitting beside my 9-year-old son, Noah, as he struggled with his homework. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows, while bicycles passed along the canal below. My phone began vibrating on the kitchen counter. It was Michael's mother, Margaret. When I answered, I heard crying. Then she whispered the words that changed everything. "Rachel, Sophie has stopped the wedding. People often ask when my marriage ended. They assume it ended when the judge signed our divorce papers. It didn't. My marriage ended on an ordinary Wednesday evening in Boston, when I realized my husband had become more interested in the messages on his phone than in the family sitting around him. Michael was never openly cruel. He didn't shout or slam doors. Instead, he slowly disappeared while remaining physically present. He hurried through dinner, answered emails during family films, and carried his phone everywhere, even from one room to another. For 18 years, we had built what appeared to be a happy life. We owned a comfortable house in a quiet Boston suburb. Michael was a senior sales director for a technology company, and I managed international projects for a pharmaceutical firm. We had 2 wonderful children and enough photographs to convince anyone that we were happy. Perhaps we had been happy once. Then Claire Morgan joined Michael's company as its new communications director. According to Michael, she was simply a colleague. She attended conferences with him, traveled with his team, and stayed late after meetings. Soon they shared private jokes that stopped whenever I entered the room. When I questioned him, Michael looked offended. "You're becoming suspicious of everything, Rachel." For several months, I convinced myself he was right. I told myself I was tired, insecure, or imagining patterns that weren't there. But women rarely become suspicious without a reason. We notice when familiar routines change. We notice unexplained absences and carefully hidden smiles. Most importantly, we notice when the person beside us begins offering someone else the attention that once belonged to us. The truth revealed itself on a cold Friday afternoon. I was searching through Michael's desk for the warranty documents for our heating system when I found a narrow velvet box beneath a stack of files. Inside was a diamond bracelet. It wasn't my birthday. Our anniversary was months away, and the bracelet wasn't remotely similar to anything I wore. Beneath the box was a receipt bearing Claire's name. That evening, I placed the bracelet and receipt on the kitchen table. Michael entered, removed his coat, and froze. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. "I wasn't going to tell you this way." Those words hurt more than the discovery itself. They meant he had already imagined another moment, another explanation, and another future. One that had been planned without me. Our divorce took 10 months. There were no screaming matches in court and no dramatic confrontations. Our lawyers divided 18 years into categories: property, investments, liabilities, and custody. The coldness of those words broke something inside me. They could not capture Christmas mornings, family holidays, hospital visits, bedtime stories, or the night Michael and I held Noah between us as he struggled to breathe. Noah had suffered from severe asthma since early childhood. Shortly before the divorce, my company offered me a 3-year leadership position in Amsterdam. The role included access to a highly respected pediatric respiratory program. Michael agreed that Noah should go with me, but he insisted Sophie remain in Massachusetts. His lawyer argued that Sophie's school, friends, and grandparents were there. My lawyer warned that opposing the arrangement could prolong the custody dispute and put both children through another year of uncertainty. Eventually, the judge approved the separation. Noah would live with me in Amsterdam. Sophie would stay with Michael in Boston. Signing those papers felt like agreeing to divide my own heart. At the airport, Sophie wrapped her arms around my waist and refused to release me. "Mommy, when are you coming back?" I knelt in front of her. "As often as I can. And you'll come to Amsterdam too. What if I miss you before that? You call me. What if you're sleeping? I'll wake up. What if you're working? I'll answer." Her lower lip trembled. "Will I still be your little girl when you're far away?" I kissed her forehead. "There isn't an ocean big enough to change that." She held me tighter. "I'll keep your hugs safe until you come back." Amsterdam gave Noah the medical support he needed. His breathing slowly improved, and for that I remained deeply grateful. But every good moment carried the knowledge that Sophie was missing from it. We spoke through video calls every evening. At first, she showed me drawings, told me school stories, and asked Noah endless questions. Then something changed. Her calls became shorter. Her answers became quieter. She often looked toward her bedroom door before speaking. One evening, I heard Claire's voice behind her. "Sophie, sit properly." Sophie immediately straightened her back. "I have to go, Mommy." Before I could respond, the screen went dark. 2 weeks later, Michael called. "Claire and I are getting married." So soon? When it's right, you know. I almost laughed at the cruelty of that sentence. After 18 years with me, certainty had apparently taken him only a few months with Claire. Then he added, "Sophie is going to be our flower girl. It'll help her feel included." A few days later, Sophie called me from beneath her blanket. "Daddy says I have an important job at the wedding." "I'm sure you'll do your best." She became silent. Then, in a voice barely louder than the rain outside my window, she whispered, "But Mommy, Abby don't want to do it." Thousands of kilometers separated us. For the first time in my life, being her mother didn't feel like enough. By the time Sophie admitted she didn't want to be the flower girl, I had learned the cruelest truth about being a mother at a distance. Worry survives every border. No number of video calls could tell me whether she had eaten breakfast or slept peacefully. I couldn't smooth her hair before school, notice the shadows beneath her eyes, or recognize the small expressions that revealed what she was too frightened to say. All I had was a screen, and screens could hide almost everything. The following morning, I called Michael. "I think Sophie is struggling with the wedding." "She's fine," he replied immediately. "She told me she doesn't want to be the flower girl." "She's 7, Rachel. Last week she didn't want to wear her winter coat. This isn't about a coat. She knows how she feels." Michael released an impatient breath. "You always make things more dramatic than they are." I had heard that sentence throughout our marriage. Whenever my feelings became inconvenient, he described them as an overreaction. "I'm not trying to cause an argument," I said. "I'm asking you to listen to our daughter." "I do listen." "No, Michael, you listen only when she agrees with you." "I have a meeting." The call ended. Michael never needed to win difficult conversations. He simply decided when they were over. Several days later, Sophie called while he was working. She sat on her bed wearing pink pajamas covered with silver stars. "Mommy, look." She held up a pair of white shoes. "They're beautiful. They hurt my feet." My heart tightened. "Are they for the wedding?" She nodded and pushed one foot into a shoe. "Claire says I have to practice." "Practice what?" "Walking and smiling." Sophie placed the phone against a stack of books and stood. She straightened her shoulders, folded her hands around an imaginary flower basket, and began walking. Step. Smile. Stop. Turn. Smile again. Her movements were painfully precise. "What happens if you forget to smile?" I asked. She looked toward the closed door. "We start again." Children should practice spelling words, dance routines, or lines for school plays. They should never have to rehearse happiness. Michael's mother, Margaret, called me every Sunday. She rarely criticized her son directly, but she loved Sophie too much to conceal what she saw. "I'm worried about her," she admitted. "What's happening?" "Claire wants everything to be perfect." Margaret explained that every weekend had become another wedding obligation. Dress fittings, hair appointments, venue visits, photographs, and rehearsals. Sophie attended each one without complaint. "Does she cry?" I asked. "Not in front of them. Does she become angry?" "No, she has simply stopped asking questions." Margaret's voice cracked. "That frightens me more than tears. Children ask questions when they feel safe. When they become completely silent, they're often trying to avoid making something worse." That evening, Noah came home from school carrying a drawing. 4 figures stood across the paper. He and Sophie were in the center, holding my hands. Michael stood alone near the edge. "Why is Dad over there?" I asked. Noah shrugged. "That's where he belongs in the picture." Children often reveal truths before they understand them. The wedding plans continued appearing online. Michael posted photographs from cake tastings and vineyard tours. Claire shared pictures of flowers, expensive invitations, and her designer wedding dress. Friends commented beneath them, "You two are perfect together. So happy you found your soulmate." Every cheerful message erased another piece of the 18 years Michael and I had shared. I wasn't jealous. That feeling had disappeared months earlier. What hurt was watching people celebrate a beautiful new beginning without acknowledging the dishonesty beneath it. One afternoon, Sophie called from Margaret's house. "Mommy, I heard someone say you lost." My stomach tightened. "Who said that?" "One of Daddy's friends." She said Daddy won. "This isn't a competition, sweetheart. But did somebody win?" "No." She stared down at her hands. "Did you lose me?" The question stole the breath from my lungs. "Never." "Promise?" "I promise." Parents can stop being married, but mothers don't stop loving their children. Her face relaxed. "I believe you." During that visit, Sophie found several old photograph albums in Margaret's guest room. She sat on the carpet, turning the pages carefully. There were pictures from family holidays, Christmas mornings, and Noah's first birthday. One showed Michael and me laughing together beside a lake. "Were Mommy and Daddy happy?" Sophie asked. "Yes," Margaret answered honestly. "For a long time. What happened?" "Sometimes adults make mistakes." Sophie touched the picture with one finger. "Can mistakes make people forget they love you?" Margaret later told me she had gone into the bathroom and cried. A week later, my sister Julia visited Boston for work and spent an afternoon with Sophie. She called me that evening. "Rachel, something isn't right. What happened?" She barely speaks unless someone asks her a direct question, and she apologizes constantly. "For what?" "Everything. Walking too slowly, dropping a pencil, asking for water. She apologized when I couldn't find my car keys." Julia paused. "A 7-year-old shouldn't be sorry for existing." That night, I opened an airline website and searched for the earliest flight to Boston. Every instinct urged me to bring my daughter home, but arriving without Michael's consent could violate our custody agreement. His lawyer could present it as interference, and I might lose even the limited access I had. Sometimes the law's version of responsible parenting feels painfully similar to abandonment. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sophie called from beneath the large oak tree in Michael's garden. "I wrote something for you. Will you read it to me?" She unfolded a wrinkled sheet of paper. "Dear Mommy," she began. "Everyone smiles except me. I try really hard. I don't want Daddy to be angry." She looked at the screen. "I love Daddy. I know. And I love you. I know that too." She carefully folded the letter. "I'll give it to you when I see you. I'll keep it forever." "I knew you would." The evening before the wedding, Sophie stayed with Margaret and her husband, Thomas. As Margaret tucked her into bed, Sophie spoke into the darkness. "Grandma?" "Yes, darling. If someone promises forever, why do they forget?" Margaret had no answer. She climbed beneath the blanket and held Sophie until she fell asleep. The following morning, the wedding began at a restored chapel overlooking the Maine coast. White roses lined the aisle and polished lanterns hung from the wooden beams. Beyond the windows, waves struck the rocks below. Claire's carefully designed fairy tale was ready. No one realized that its smallest participant was carrying the truth everyone else had chosen to ignore. The morning of Michael's wedding began quietly for me. Amsterdam was cool and overcast. Rain clung to the apartment windows while Noah and I ate pancakes before his Saturday football practice. If I had known what was about to happen in Maine, I doubt I could have swallowed a single bite. Before leaving, Noah stopped beside the refrigerator. His family drawing was still attached to it with a blue magnet. "Dad is getting married today," he said. "Yes." "Do you think Sophie is scared?" "I think she's nervous. I wish we could be there." "So do I." He wrapped his arms around me. Sometimes the embrace of a 9-year-old can hold together a mother who is quietly falling apart. In Maine, the coastal venue looked like a photograph from an expensive wedding magazine. The restored chapel stood on a grassy hill above the Atlantic. White roses decorated the aisle and candles glowed inside glass lanterns. A reception marquee had been erected nearby. Every table displayed fine china, polished silverware, and handwritten place cards. Michael and Claire had spared no expense. To most of the arriving guests, it looked like the beginning of a fairy tale. Only a few knew how the story had truly begun. Sophie arrived early with Margaret and Thomas. She wore her ivory flower girl dress, a ribbon in her brown hair, and the white shoes that hurt her feet. Margaret later told me Sophie looked beautiful. Then she added, but she never smiled, not until someone reminded her. Inside the bridal room, a stylist curled Sophie's hair while Claire watched. "Remember what we practiced," Claire said. Sophie nodded. "Shoulders straight," another nod, "and keep smiling, today needs to be perfect." All right, Claire turned back toward her bridesmaids, satisfied. She didn't notice Sophie rubbing the heel of her painful shoe. To Claire, she was another part of the ceremony that needed to perform correctly. Michael found Sophie standing alone outside the chapel. "There's my princess." "Hello, Daddy. Are you excited?" "I don't know." He adjusted the ribbon in her hair. "You understand how important today is, don't you?" "Yes. I need you to help make it beautiful." Sophie looked toward the parking area. "Will Mommy ever come here?" Michael hesitated. "No." "Oh." He checked his watch and led her inside. He never noticed that she continued watching the road as though hoping my car might appear. Around midday, Margaret sent me a message. "The ceremony is about to begin." I stared at it before replying. "Please stay close to Sophie." Her answer arrived immediately. "I promise." Guests filled the chapel. Michael's colleagues talked over glasses of champagne while photographers moved through the crowd, capturing every smile. A string quartet played near the altar. One guest leaned toward another and said, "It's wonderful to see Michael getting a fresh start." Margaret overheard him but remained silent. Adults might call it a fresh start. Children carry every goodbye into whatever comes next. The music changed, and the guests stood. Claire's bridesmaids walked slowly down the aisle, then Sophie appeared. She held a basket of white petals and moved exactly as she had been taught. Step. Smile. Stop. Continue. Everyone admired how composed she looked. No one understood that composure and happiness were not the same thing. When Sophie reached the front, she stood beside Michael. Claire entered moments later wearing an elegant lace gown. The minister welcomed everyone and began speaking about love, trust, and lifelong commitment. Margaret watched Sophie's expression change at the word lifelong. After the vows began, the minister reached the traditional question. "If anyone present knows of any reason these two should not be joined in marriage, let them speak now." A few people smiled, then Sophie raised her hand. At first, Michael didn't see her. When a guest coughed nervously, he turned. "Sophie," he whispered, "put your hand down." She didn't move. "I have something to say." The chapel became completely silent. Claire stared at her. The minister lowered his book. Sophie looked up at her father. "Daddy, before you marry Claire, can you answer a question?" Michael forced a smile. "Not now, sweetheart. But you said people should tell the truth in church." Several guests looked away. "What's your question?" the minister asked gently. Sophie took a breath. "If marriage means promising to love someone forever, why did Daddy stop loving Mommy?" Michael's face lost all color. Sophie continued, before anyone could interrupt. "Mommy says I'm allowed to love both of you, but Daddy's friend said he won and Mommy lost. Did I lose her too?" "No," Michael said quickly. "Of course not. Then why did she have to go so far away?" "That was because of work and Noah's health." "But why couldn't we all still be a family?" Michael looked toward the guests as though someone might rescue him. "No one did." Sophie's voice trembled. "I tried to be happy today. Claire taught me how to smile and I practiced. But it isn't a real smile." Claire lowered her eyes. "I'm not trying to ruin the wedding," Sophie said. "I just want to know why promises matter today if they didn't matter before." For several seconds, the only sound came from waves striking the rocks outside. Michael knelt in front of her. "Adults sometimes make complicated decisions. Were they too complicated to tell the truth?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. Claire stepped closer. "Sophie, I know you love your father. I hope that one day you can love me too." Sophie looked at her politely. "I don't know you enough yet. I'd like us to become a family." "But I already have a family." Thomas slowly rose from the front row. He had remained silent throughout the divorce, believing private problems should stay private. This time, however, he walked directly to his granddaughter. He picked up her fallen basket and placed it in her hands. "You did nothing wrong," he told her. "I wasn't trying to be bad." "I know. You were asking for an honest answer." The minister announced a short pause. Guests began leaving the chapel or whispering quietly in their seats. In minutes, Claire's perfect schedule collapsed. Margaret and Thomas took Sophie outside. They walked with her along a path overlooking the sea. "Is Daddy angry?" Sophie asked. "I think he's hurting," Margaret answered. "Because of me?" "No. Sometimes the truth hurts because it shows us something we should have faced sooner." Back in the chapel, Michael sat beside Claire. "I never imagined this," he said. Claire stared at the scattered petals. "You never imagined a child would say what the adults were thinking. Do you believe that?" "I think everyone noticed how quickly this happened." They were simply too polite to say anything. My phone rang a few minutes later. Margaret told me everything. I sat at the kitchen table as tears filled my eyes, not because Sophie had embarrassed Michael, but because she had carried a burden no child should have been forced to carry. "How is she?" I asked. Margaret's answer broke my heart. "She keeps asking whether she ruined the wedding." The ceremony eventually continued, not because anyone felt comfortable, but because life rarely allows us to restart a painful day. The minister privately asked Michael and Claire whether they still wished to marry. They both said yes, though the excitement had disappeared from their voices. They exchanged vows and rings. The guests applauded politely, but the reception never found its rhythm. Music played, yet few people danced. Conversations remained subdued, and even the professional photographs showed smiles that looked carefully arranged. No decoration could erase what everyone had witnessed. That evening, Michael carried a sleeping Sophie into the guest room at his parents' house. As he laid her down, an old photograph slipped from beneath her arm. It showed the four of us during a holiday in Vermont. Michael held Noah on his shoulders while Sophie sat in my lap, laughing. It had been taken before Claire, the secrets, the lawyers, and the custody agreements. On the back, Sophie had written 7 uneven words. "My first family. I love them all forever." Michael sat beside her bed and cried. The following morning, he called me. "Rachel, I'm sorry. Years earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they sounded like the beginning of a conversation rather than a solution. What are you apologizing for?" "I don't know where to begin. Maybe all of it. I'm glad you called, but an apology won't immediately repair what happened." "I know. Could you speak to Sophie?" "Of course." When Sophie came to the phone, her voice sounded uncertain. "Mommy, everyone is talking about me." "They're talking because you were honest. Was I bad?" "No. I wasn't trying to stop the wedding." "I know. I only wanted Daddy to answer." My throat tightened. I think he finally understands that. The weeks following the wedding brought no public scandal or dramatic confrontation. Instead, small changes began appearing. Michael stopped posting photographs of his supposedly perfect life. Friends who had congratulated him now asked how Sophie was doing. That question followed him everywhere. Margaret continued calling me on Sundays. One afternoon, she sounded cautiously hopeful. Michael canceled 2 business trips. "Why?" He said Sophie needed him. "Yesterday they spent 3 hours building a birdhouse. How did it turn out?" "It leans terribly." I smiled. "I'm sure she loves it." "She does. Healing sometimes begins with nothing more remarkable than crooked wood, spilled glue, and a parent who finally stays." Michael also began listening. Not perfectly and not without discomfort, but he tried. One evening, Sophie sat beside him in the living room. "Daddy, were you happier when Mommy lived here?" "Some things were happier." "Then why didn't you fix them?" Michael lowered his book. "I should have tried harder." "I think so too." Sophie didn't say it cruelly. She had simply found the truthful answer she needed. 3 months after the wedding, Michael requested a video call with me. When his face appeared, he looked emotionally exhausted. "I've started family counseling," he said. "That's good. I assumed the counselor would tell me how everyone else needed to change." A faint smile crossed his face. "Apparently, I'm the one with homework." "What kind?" "She asked me to watch our old family videos. I couldn't finish the first one." "Why?" "Because I finally noticed that you were carrying most of our life. You arranged the birthdays, stayed awake, wrapping Christmas presents, and remembered everything the children needed. I thought those moments simply happened. They never simply happened. I know that now." His marriage to Claire soon began showing cracks. Once the excitement of the wedding disappeared, ordinary life exposed what appearances had hidden. Claire wasn't prepared to become a stepmother to a grieving child. Michael couldn't ignore his guilt any longer. Sophie's words hadn't created those problems. They had merely uncovered them. One evening, Michael called again. "I want Sophie to spend the summer with you and Noah." I stared at the screen. What changed? I finally understand that she shouldn't have to choose which parent she's allowed to miss. It was the first major decision he had made entirely for Sophie, not for convenience, appearances, or victory. The day she arrived, Noah and I waited anxiously at Amsterdam Airport Schiphol. When Sophie appeared with a backpack almost as large as her body, Noah raced toward her. They collided in an embrace, laughing and crying simultaneously. Then Sophie saw me.
"Mommy."
I knelt as she ran into my arms. For a long time, none of us spoke. Her shoulders were relaxed, and the careful wedding smile was gone. The smile on her face belonged completely to her. Over the following year, Michael continued changing. He declined a promotion requiring constant travel. I've already missed too much of my children's childhood, he told Margaret. I won't miss what remains. His marriage to Claire ended quietly. They admitted that a relationship built on secrecy and excitement couldn't survive guilt and ordinary responsibility. During a visit to Boston, Claire asked to meet me. I owe you an apology, she said. I tried so hard to make everything look perfect that I never considered what Sophie had lost. Perfection doesn't create a family. No, she replied. Honesty does. That summer we celebrated Sophie's 8th birthday in a public park outside Boston. Michael grilled hamburgers, I brought a chocolate cake, and Noah helped Sophie fly a yellow kite. Nobody forced a smile or pretended we were still one household. For the first time, our imperfect family felt genuine. Sophie gave Michael a drawing. It showed 4 people standing beside 2 houses connected by a winding path. This is your house, she explained, and this is Mommy's. What's the path for? So we can visit. You don't have to live together to be kind. Michael swallowed hard. No, we only have to tell the truth. I wish you learned that sooner. So do I. She wrapped her arms around him, and he held her tightly. People sometimes ask whether I wanted revenge. At first, I imagined revenge meant watching Michael lose his marriage, reputation, and happiness. I was wrong. The best outcome was watching him become the father our children had always needed. That gift didn't belong to Michael. It belonged to Noah and Sophie. Divorce ends a marriage, but it doesn't end a parent's responsibility to protect a child's heart. Children rarely remember who won an argument. They remember who listened, who remained present, and who made them feel safe. I often think about Sophie standing in that chapel, surrounded by adults who had chosen silence. She wasn't trying to destroy a wedding. She simply believed promises should mean something. That day, the smallest person in the room spoke the truth everyone else was afraid to face. And because someone finally listened, our family began to heal.